You look fine, you show up, you smile, you get things done, you say it's all good. But deep down, there's a voice, a silent ache, a haunting sense that no matter what you do, you're just not enough. It's quiet, but it never leaves. It whispers in your choices. It colors your relationships. It shapes your reflection in the mirror. And the worst part? You've lived with it so long, you don't even realize it's a wound. Carl Jung didn't call it a trauma. He called it a shadow. A part of you so unacceptable, so rejected, that you buried it, and then built your life around avoiding it. You felt it in rooms where you didn't speak, in texts you over-edited, in people you tried to impress but never pleased. This isn't about confidence. It's about identity. It's not that you lack worth, it's that you believe you have to earn it. Jung said, "What you deny within yourself will appear outside as fate." And here's the trap. You chase validation, but you reject yourself. You attract relationships that mirror your hidden worthlessness, and you call it love. You overperform at work, hoping one more win will silence the self-doubt, but it never does. Because this isn't about success, it's about survival. And you've been surviving on a lie, that you have to become enough, as if worth is a destination. But Jung knew otherwise. He saw that this wound, the feeling of being not enough, starts long before adulthood. It begins in childhood, when love felt conditional, when mistakes brought shame, when your emotions were too much, or your silence was not enough. So what did you do? You adapted, you performed, you shape-shifted into what you thought the world wanted, just to feel safe. If this resonates with you, pause. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're waking up. Hit subscribe if you're tired of surface advice and want to go deeper into the psychology of your past, the emotions you buried, and the parts of you waiting to be reclaimed. And this is just the beginning. And now, as an adult, you've forgotten who you were before the performance. The shadow of unworthiness doesn't scream, it whispers. It disguises itself as humility, as perfectionism, as self-discipline. But really, it's fear. Fear that if you stop proving, you'll stop mattering. Fear that if someone sees the real you, they'll walk away. And the irony? Most people already don't see the real you, because you won't show them. Not because you're fake, but because you're scared. Jung's work wasn't about fixing yourself. It was about facing yourself, bringing the shadow to light. Not to destroy it, but to integrate it. Because the part of you that feels not enough is also the part of you that's most raw, most real, most ready to be reclaimed. But it won't happen through affirmation alone. It happens through confrontation, through sitting in the discomfort, not escaping it. So pause, listen, feel where that voice lives in your body, in your breath, in your memories. Ask yourself, when did I first feel like I wasn't enough? Whose voice does this echo? And what would happen if I stopped running from it? This isn't weakness. This is how healing begins, not by erasing the wound, but by honoring it, by saying, I see you. You tried to protect me, but I don't need protection anymore. I need truth. You don't remember the moment it started, but your body does. The first time you felt compared. The first time your sadness was too much. The first time someone you loved looked at you like you weren't enough. And you believed them. You didn't argue. You internalized. Because back then, survival meant adaptation. It meant shaping yourself around what got approval and shrinking the parts that didn't. That's not personality. That's pain wearing a mask. And now, years later, you're still trying to become what someone once told you you weren't. Smarter, quieter, stronger, thinner, easier to love. This is the root of the worthlessness trap. It doesn't scream, I hate myself. It whispers, maybe I'm just not built for more. Jung called this the complex. A cluster of feelings, thoughts, and reactions stored deep in the unconscious, repeating like a script you didn't write. And until you face it, it'll keep directing your life from the shadows. You'll call burnout ambition. You'll call people-pleasing kindness. You'll call hyper-independence strength. But all of it is a response to the fear that if you ever stopped performing, you'd disappear. Here's the truth. You can't heal what you keep performing over. Healing starts when you slow down enough to hear what your performance is covering. Because beneath the perfectionism, beneath the self-control, beneath the mask, is a child who just wanted to be loved without conditions. And until you hold space for that part of you, no amount of success will feel like enough. No relationship will satisfy. No affirmation will stick. Because you don't need more compliments. You need your own compassion. You need to stop chasing worth like it's a reward and start remembering that it's a birthright. But that's hard, right? Because no one taught you how. You weren't handed a roadmap for worth. You were handed standards, grades, deadlines, expectations, but not stillness, not listening, not the tools to be with yourself when you felt broken. So you ran into roles, into relationships, into accomplishments, and you called it growth. But growth isn't escape, it's return. It's remembering what the world made you forget, that your value has nothing to do with your performance and everything to do with your presence. Let's go deeper. The feeling of being not enough isn't just emotional, it's biological. When rejection happens in childhood, your nervous system encodes it as threat. It triggers a stress response that gets activated again and again, even by small things. A short text, a cold tone, a missed invitation, and suddenly you spiral, not because of the event, but because of what it mirrors. Rejection doesn't just hurt, it reactivates the wound that says, I'm not worthy. So what do? You overfunction, you withdraw, you numb, you chase. But in all those responses, the message is the same. If I was enough, this wouldn't be happening. That's the trap. You keep trying to fix your life from the perspective of your wound. You measure love by how much pain you'll tolerate. You measure success by how little you feel like a failure. But Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. They told you to just be confident, to speak up, to believe in yourself. But they never asked what part of you stopped believing in the first place. Because confidence isn't something you fake, it's something you reclaim from the places you abandoned yourself to feel safe. When you feel unworthy, you don't just act small. You trust the wrong people. You ignore red flags. You let disrespect slide. Not because you're weak, but because part of you still thinks you have to earn your place in the room. That's not empowerment. That's survival. Jung believed the shadow isn't evil. It's unloved. It's the truth you couldn't afford to look at, so you hid it under perfection, under overachievement, under silence. But even silence screams. It shows up in the way you accept crumbs and call it care. It's in the way you explain other people's bad behavior because somewhere deep down, you're convinced it's what you deserve. Let that sink in. Because until you name that belief, you can't break it. You'll keep choosing pain that feels familiar over peace that feels foreign. You'll sabotage joy because it feels like a setup. You'll distrust kindness because your nervous system is wired for chaos. And no, you're not being dramatic. You're being honest. Honest about the patterns you inherited. Honest about the protection mechanisms you built. Honest about the loneliness of living a life that looks fine but feels hollow. You see, unworthiness doesn't just hurt. It trains you to settle in friendships, in relationships, in your voice. It tells you to avoid taking up space because space feels dangerous. But Jung would say, that's exactly where your work begins. Not in becoming someone new, but in remembering who you were before shame rewrote your story. Because this isn't about self-improvement, it's about self-recovery. The goal isn't to become more lovable, it's to love the part of you that thinks you're not. That part is scared, it's tired, it's been working overtime trying to earn what should have been unconditional. And now, it's time to stop proving and start witnessing. Witness your pain without judgment. Witness your habits without shame. Witness your worth without conditions. Because until you do, you'll keep measuring yourself against standards that were never yours to begin with. You'll confuse exhaustion for productivity. You'll call emotional numbness focus. You'll wear burnout like a badge of honor because slowing down feels like failure. But pause for a moment. When did rest become a threat? When did stillness start to feel unsafe? When did you decide that your value is tied to your output? This is how trauma lives on, not just in what hurt you, but in how you learn to cope with never feeling enough. And here's the hard truth. Until you break up with your coping patterns, you can't build a new identity, one based on wholeness, not hustle, presence, not performance. Because wholeness isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the moment you stop chasing closure and start giving yourself what others refuse to. Validation, love, attention, safety. Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." So what if, for once, you stopped performing worth and started practicing it? You've been told to move on, to get over it, to forgive, forget, evolve. But healing doesn't happen on command. It happens when you stop pretending you're okay and finally admit what hurt you. You don't rise by avoiding your pain. You rise by learning how to hold it. Carl Jung called it integration, not pushing the shadow away, but sitting with it long enough to understand its message. Because the parts of you that sabotage love, that resist success, that shrink when seen, they're not random. They're the survival instincts of a younger you who learned that shrinking meant safety. But here's the paradox. What once protected you now imprisons you. It stops you from being vulnerable because vulnerability was once punished. It stops you from receiving love because love once came with conditions. It stops you from taking up space because space once came with shame. So you adapt. You become the fixer, the overthinker, the one who never asks for help because needing anything feels dangerous. But deep down, you're starving for connection, not attention, not praise, real, grounded, attuned connection. The kind that sees beyond your surface, the kind that doesn't leave when you're messy, the kind that reminds you that you were never too much. You were just too aware in a world that wasn't ready for your depth. And here's the truth. The worthlessness trap doesn't just make you feel small, it isolates you. Because you don't believe you can be loved as you are, you hide, you perform, you disappear in plain sight. You smile when you want to cry, you give when you're empty, you show up for everyone, but never let anyone show up for you. Jung would call this the persona, the mask you wear to function, to blend, to survive. But the longer you wear the mask, the harder it is to recognize yourself underneath it. So let's ask the real question. Who are you when no one needs you? Who are you when you're not fixing, proving, or chasing? What would happen if, just for a moment, you stopped trying to be impressive and started being real? That's the beginning of freedom. Not the kind that looks good online, the kind that feels like oxygen after years of holding your breath. Because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about peeling back the roles, the expectations, the armor, until what's left is someone you actually recognize. Someone who knows that their voice matters, their feelings matter, their needs matter, even when they're messy, even when they're uncertain, even when they don't match the version of you that others prefer. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the you that gets applause, not the you that avoids conflict, the one who lives from the inside out, not outside in. That version of you has always been there. You've just been busy surviving. Now it's time to remember. There comes a moment when the pain of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of changing. That's when everything begins. But change doesn't start with motivation. It starts with mourning. Mourning the years you spent proving, the energy you wasted hiding, the parts of you that never got to grow because they were too busy surviving. Carl Jung knew this. You can't become whole without grieving the self you lost to meet someone else's standards. And the truth is, you were never broken. You were adapting. That overthinking, it was protection. That people-pleasing, it was strategy. That self-doubt, it was the echo of a world that made you question your enoughness before you even knew who you were. You didn't choose the wound, but now you can choose the healing. And no, it won't look like a perfect morning routine or a miracle epiphany. It will look like this: saying no when you used to stay silent, pausing before you over-explain, noticing the panic and still choosing peace, realizing that discomfort isn't danger, it's detox. You're rewiring your nervous system to stop seeing worth as something you earn, because worth isn't earned, it's remembered. And you remember it by practicing it daily in tiny acts of rebellion. Rebellion against your past conditioning. Rebellion against the lie that you're only valuable when you're productive, quiet, agreeable. Rebellion against the shame that told you your needs were too loud, your dreams too unrealistic, your softness too much. Jung would call this individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, not a replica of who the world trained you to be. It's slow, it's raw, it's sacred, and most people won't understand it. They'll ask why you've changed. They'll call you distant, difficult, dramatic. Let them. You're not becoming harder. You're becoming clearer. Clear on what you want. Clear on what you no longer tolerate. Clear on the kind of life that doesn't just look good, but actually feels safe. You'll lose some people along the way. That's okay. Because when you finally stop abandoning yourself, you stop attracting people who benefit from your self-abandonment. You start building something different, not louder, not shinier, but truer. You'll notice the shifts. You stop seeking permission. You start trusting your no. You realize boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about keeping your truth in. You show up, even when your voice shakes. You rest without guilt. You love without needing to be perfect first. And slowly, the mask starts to crack. The armor gets lighter. The real you, the quiet, steady, sacred you, starts to emerge. You were never too broken to heal. You were just too wise to pretend anymore. You made it here, not because the path was easy, but because something inside you refused to stay numb. Maybe you've carried pain that wasn't yours. Maybe you've worn masks so long you forgot your face beneath them. Maybe the lie wasn't that you were unworthy, but that healing was impossible. But here you are, and that means one thing. The story didn't end where it hurt. It began where you chose to stay. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That's the invitation, not to erase the pain, but to alchemize it, to take the shame, the fear, the silence, and turn it into power, into presence, into peace. You don't need to become a new version of yourself. You need to come home to the one who never stopped waiting for you. That little voice inside that whispered, "I deserve more than this." That flicker of rebellion that said, "I will not live asleep." That quiet knowing that your worth is not a goal, it's a birthright. And no one can take that from you. You're allowed to rest, to say no, to be seen in your softness, to make space for your rage, to outgrow relationships that were rooted in your pain, not your potential. Healing doesn't make you more likable, it makes you more real. And realness is the most radical act in a world that profits from your self-doubt. So breathe. Breathe into the parts of you that feel unlovable. Breathe into the questions that still feel unanswered. Breathe into the truth that this work, this messy, non-linear, sacred work, is what freedom really looks like. And no, you don't have to do it all at once. One boundary at a time, one honest moment at a time, one reclaimed breath at a time. That's how healing happens. Not in a rush, but in rhythm. And if you're still here, you already know. You weren't too sensitive. You were just tuned into things the world taught you to ignore. That's not weakness. That's your edge. That's your gift. So here's your reminder. You don't need fixing. You need witnessing. The parts of you that learn to survive don't need to disappear. They need to be loved, because even the shadow just wants to come home. And when you're ready, don't stop here. Watch our next video. Because some wounds don't want quick answers. They want to be understood. Subscribe to Depthora for weekly videos on shadow work, self-worth, and the healing process no one teaches us in school. You're not broken. You're just remembering who you really are. And we're still right here, listening.